Hi, my name is Nicole Cuce, and I'm going to tell you about my unit plan, which is a sequence of 3 lessons. Each lesson took anywhere from 1 to 5 days in span after the lesson was introduced. So my first lesson was focused on making predictions in fiction texts. My second lesson of the unit plan was focused on stop and jot, primarily in nonfiction texts, but it was also used in fiction texts. And the third lesson was main idea and supporting details, which was again used in both texts. But for my first lesson, it was used in nonfiction. So I have a few of the materials here. This is an anchor chart that I used for the prediction lesson, and it says we can make many predictions before we read, while we read, and then after we read is assessing the predictions. So before we read is by looking at the cover of the book, taking a sneak peek, and this lesson was called Preview and Predict, so the students went over the strategy of previewing a text or taking a sneak peek, thinking, what will this book be about, how do I know? Then they jotted that down, and then while they read, there was this bookmark was given to all students that says stop, make a prediction, and they were told to stop and think what will happen next, and they were using what they've read so far in addition to their sneak peek. This took place on the first day. Some of the higher level students were able to then continue reading the chapter of the book or the entire book depending on their level. And then they went on to assess their prediction. Some of the students did not get to that on the first day, and this lesson was a 2-day lesson, so those students went on to that the next day. And after we read, we thought, was our prediction correct? Why or why not? And as you can see, there are many visual aids due to the ESL students in the classroom. The next lesson was on stop and jot, which was done, as I said, it was a few days in nonfiction and then a few days in fiction. So with the stop and jot lesson, students were given a bookmark, and the bookmark had different symbols on it with prompts for what you can stop and jot about. And this was just to promote reading comprehension, so students were stopping and jotting about something they thought was funny, something they thought was interesting, a new word that they came across, something that they noticed with the characters. It could even be a prediction. So the idea was just to get them to stop and think, because while they're reading, sometimes they rush through. And in second grade, students are moving from lower level picture books to higher level chapter books where there's no pictures by the end of the year for students who are on or above grade level standards. So for those, for the students, it's just important for us to keep them engaged in the text by having these different ways to promote reading comprehension. So my last lesson, which was kind of like the overall goal or objective for the whole unit plan, which was to get students to successfully identify the main idea and supporting details. The students have already had a little bit of work with main idea a little bit earlier in the school year, so now we're focusing really on the 3 supporting details. So for this lesson, I chose to tie it into social studies. This was the anchor chart that I created. So as you can see, there were words to know, which was, the social studies book was related to social studies sequence for second grade, which is the scope and sequence, New York social studies scope and sequence for second grade is primarily focused on New York and its geography. So the book that we were reading was the bridges and tunnels of New York City and waterways. So I had a picture of bridges, tunnels, borough, something the students should know. And then I had connects, spans, and glossary. And these were just some words that I wanted students to, I really focus on front loading the vocabulary prior to all the lessons, because with English language learners, that's a really important skill, important strategy, excuse me. And then I had this sentence down here, the main idea is blank. I know this because detail 1, detail 2, and detail 3. And that was really important as well, because you want to give you want to have a model up for students to be able to reference during the lesson. Again, due to the number of ESL students in the room, but there were also students that are just lower level readers or who need more prompting. So this just was another scaffold for students. This way they can reference it during the lesson when there's a discussion portion of the lesson. The tactile part of this this lesson, which was really great for all of my students, but especially my IEP students who I had 2 students with IEPs that needed and benefit more from hands-on activities. So students were grouped, and each group or partnership was given this popsicle stick, and this was modeled for them. They read a section. Every group or partnership was given a section of the text, which was New York City's bridges, tunnels, and waterways, and they would state the main idea. So, for instance, the main idea is the Verrazano Bridge, and then they would clip on their details. So, detail 1, and they would say, this bridge connects Staten Island and Brooklyn. Detail 2, this bridge is also known as the Narrows, and then so on and so forth. So they would clip on their details, and this just gives them something to think, okay, let me see, did I say the first detail, did I say the second, just to make sure that they're using the language and that they're stating out their 3 supporting details. And if students can only get 2, well, it will allow me to informally assess if they only have 2 on here. Then students were given this graphic organizer, which was just for them to transfer their information over. So they wrote the main idea, and then they wrote their 3 supporting details. So after they told it to me verbally, they went back to their seats and they completed this, and this was a formal assessment.